Today we're going to continue on chapter 10, which is the chapter on writing for broadcast. The chapter combines both radio and television writing tips, and so we're only going to deal with the radio tips right now. Bless you, Nick. And when we move on to writing television stories, we'll revisit the chapter for some of the great things that it has to say about writing to video. So we talked a little bit about the difference of structural models for these news stories. And the inverted pyramid, can anyone remember why the inverted pyramid is shaped as it is? What's supposed to go at the top and what's at the bottom of the inverted pyramid? The lead, okay. And the lead would contain?
Who, what, when, where, why.
Okay, 5 W's and an H. Right, okay, which could be considered your most important information probably, right? And then as you move down the inverted pyramid, what goes down at the bottom?
Additional extraneous details.
Yes, details, additional information, right? So as you move down the story, things get less important. And it's a print model because the idea was that if there wasn't enough space in your evening newspaper to contain the whole story, the editor could easily chop off the bottom of it and not have to rewrite your story. Micah, can you moderate chat for us? Thank you. I appreciate that. Very nice. It's just the attendance sheet. Okay, we sometimes see in broadcasting a model that I think it looks more like a diamond in the sense that it will begin with something very specific and perhaps end with something very specific. And in the middle of your story, you're more likely to have a very general information of general interest, let's say. So in this case, I'll write specific on each part there, and then general here in the middle. And, so in a way, we're comparing things on a slightly different basis here. Because by specific, what I mean is broadcast stories very often begin with some specific event involving some character or person who's going through some experience. And it's a good way to ease us into a story with a character who's already there for us to relate to, something going on which is visual or audible and interesting, rather than starting us off right in with perhaps some general information, which is of course important to the story, but is maybe not as engaging as starting off with a specific person in a specific activity or something like that. So this is very often in a broadcast story, you'll start out specific and then kind of zoom out as to, okay, this is why, this person is doing what they're doing or why they're experiencing what they're experiencing. Because, there's a new law about, I don't know what, reporting yourself to the authorities or something. So specific, general, and then back to specific. The textbook has a slightly different way of describing this in terms of a circle closing the loop. So they like a circular model, but I think where my diamond and their circle are pretty similar is the idea that if you start out with something, you very often at the end of your story come back to it. So kind of closing a loop. In this case, if we start out with someone who's struggling to pay the monthly rent, and then we zoom out to a story about gentrification and the rising cost of living in San Francisco, we can often come back to close the narrative off in a satisfying manner by returning to that person we started with. It's one of the ways of, simply and effectively closing up a short story that we're telling. It's 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes in radio or TV or something like that. So this would be your broadcast model, and this would be your print model. And you may have already experienced some of this when I asked you to adapt a print story into a reader or a wrap for broadcast. your print story, you'd typically be taking just the information out of the first couple of paragraphs, and then as you put it into a reader or a wrap, you might find that that's all that you would even need there. Now, as we go on and do our features, this is where you get the chance to maybe, introduce us to a character, to something specific, and then as you kind of move out, get to the more general issue. So if you're thinking about the story that you're working on right now, where you're conducting an interview, can you think already of, where you might begin with a specific character or event and then get out to the general? Can you think already about how you begin specifically and then what kinds of general information you want to give later on in the story? Can anybody relate that to the story that they're working on now? Just off the top of your head. It's not. Yeah, Corey?
Well, like I said, my interview was on I did with the head promoter of the local all-pro wrestling, indie wrestling organization. So, I guess I can start out with, how he runs it, what he's trying to do. Or actually, no, I'd start out with the fundraising for the event, and then the generalization of what they do there, the people they bring in, and what they're trying to do on an everyday basis, and then come back around to the fundraiser and what was going on that evening.
Cool. Or another place you could start is in the midst of, whatever spectacle that they're putting on,
Yeah.
and moving out from there, then zooming out to like, how hard is this to organize? What kinds of things go into this, whole event? That would definitely give your generalization there. Yeah, you have a choice as to where to start, but I'm thinking like, what would be the most either audibly interesting or visually interesting place to start a story like that? It seems with wrestling, you want to just get something right in there like that. Yeah. So very often your specific is the person you're interviewing, and you're trying to catch them in the act of doing whatever it is that they do, and then general might be giving more context, or in your case exploring, how the thing is set up, that kind of thing. Anybody else getting ideas about what they're working on based on that type of story structure? Yeah, JP, and then Nika.
I'm thinking like for my interview about this street fair in there's one shipyard, like a resident or a vendor at the beginning, and then the people who organize it, the housing organization in the middle, and then another resident or vendor, DJ or performer at the end.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, for sure. Nika?
I think I could start with why the book sale had to exist and what they need to raise money for, move into just about the book sale in general, to finish off with how much money they made and where that's going.
Okay, so you're going from the specifics of the need for that event out to more generally, like, how's the whole thing put on every year and that kind of thing. Okay, making sense. And do they target specifically the funds that they raise every year? Do they raise one year for, infrastructure, the next year to buy more books? Do they do something like that?
I should have asked that, but I think it's just general budget funds.
Okay, yeah. They may not want to tie themselves down to that type of thing. I know in my kids' school there's a new theme every year, and they kind of use that to pump everybody up every year on something different. So it's all fundraising for a good cause.
And Jenny had
Oh, thank you. Should we look at?
well, yeah, of the two people she asked, one couldn't really do it, and one hasn't gotten back to her.
Oh dear. Okay. So one no and one not developing yet. Huh. Okay. Well, Jenny, just keep us in the loop about what's happening with that.
She also asked, how would you apply the diamond method to a profile?
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, at that point, again, you might want to enter into the story with your character doing something, characteristic. What is it? Why are we profiling? What reason are you asking the audience to be interested in this person for? Okay, maybe it's a long distance runner, so you could, start the story off with their training regimen, and then after that, your generalization might be, okay, what what is, what's the meaning of this activity in the life of this person? What is, what more generally could an audience, connect with in the story? What's your theme? If your theme is, again, my cliche, overcoming adversity or whatever, this is the place in the generalization section where you make that clear, the link between the specific person you're talking about and what they do and the more general theme. So, often the midst of the story is where you make connections between the individual you're talking about and those bigger themes. Let's say, I don't know, someone who went back to school later in life, so you might meet up with them the first time we find them, they're doing their homework in the library or something like that, and then it's later on in the more general part of the story, it's a chance to say, well, Susan is like many other people over 50 nowadays who have found the need to retrain, and she's back learning different skills, which is a challenge, and she's also having the rewards of meeting a whole bunch of different people, different ages that she'd never contact necessarily. So, then you're connecting your central character out to, the bigger social thing that's going on, whether it's retraining or people of a certain age, what they're doing with their lives and being, knocked out of secure careers and going to other stuff. So your middle section is a place to make that connection. Kyle?
I don't really know where to start structuring this, and I think some of it's because I have more than one
Person to deal with,
approach. Yeah, I'm coming in from a couple of different angles. I don't know how to start a specific spot and go broad and come back. I'm not really sure.
Well, I mean, if given that you have already made contact with several people who are living the van life, I'd say, you can't obviously start in on 3 people at once. So, choose a person whose story seems, immediately interesting. How do they wind up from there to there? What's going on with that? And then you can, go out more general and talk about, people choosing this lifestyle and also the context. And then I guess you're going to talk to a police officer on this go around, right? So, so that the diamond doesn't really account for twists and turns in the narrative. There's something they call the Christmas tree that does, but let's not get into too many silly models. So, but however, it basically feel free once you have maybe connected the first person you've introduced to the larger issue, you can bring in other folks who are living the van life, or you can go to the police, or and in fact, maybe the second person you bring in could speak to, the varied relationships between the van livers and the community around them. It's where I used to hang out, I was getting hassled all the time, and then you could bounce from that to the CCSF police officer saying, as long as people give us no problem, we're good with it, or whatever they say.
Okay.
Yeah. So it winds up being a kind of a specific route through it, even although when you're sitting there starting out, it's this could go anyway, right?
Yeah, I feel like it's probably just going to start coming together more as I have the interviews and pieces in front of me.
Gotcha, yeah.
Trying to look at it ahead of time with as many different avenues as I'm coming in at it with is where to start.
Gotcha, yeah. But maybe keep that in mind just as an initial kind of structure. You're going to want to meet somebody and you're going to want to get your audience interested in them as quick as you can. And then you're going to want to talk to a police officer, which is inevitably going to be about, the relationships of the group living the van life to the rest of the community. So, if you can find somebody that will push the story in that direction, you're already heading that way. So and if it doesn't work out that way, you can write it somewhere else, when you have all the other pieces. What I find is it's chaos to start with, and it's always good to have a little bit of structure to get through the chaos. And then as you're going on, if it turns out your structure was just false hope, what the heck? You throw it out, and then you're grasping onto something else. But A lot of it's just to make yourself feel like, yeah, okay, this will go okay. I'll have something by 6 o'clock. This will go okay, you know, because that's really how it feels. It's like, the worst is when it keeps getting kicked off and kicked off and kicked off, and you're in the editing room. It's like, what's this about again? And then you appreciate the editor who very often they're able to say, yeah, it's like this. It's like, oh, yeah, thank you. So editors are really important in television anyway. Okay. So hopefully that little thing will be useful. Apply strategies to write for the ear as opposed to writing for the eye. So here's the idea that we're writing a little differently for broadcast than we do for print. We went over last class like real fast. Just, you know, active sentences, short sentence length, verbs and nouns that are, you know, evocative but simple. What else? One thing that I was thinking about is one of the particular challenges we have is writing into a soundbite. So once you've done your interview and you're selecting good sound bites, now you know that what you have to do basically is write around the sound bites, or the quotes if you were writing in print, and you have to effectively kind of wind your way through them, you know, and set them up in as efficient a manner as possible. And as I was saying, maybe the default way of doing this is kind of as though you were still writing for print, and you would say, City College Police Chief James Brown said, you know, and then you just cite the quote, right? Well, in broadcasting, you could say so and so told us this, and then you play the tape. But it is more effective and more engaging for the audience if you try to go beyond that. You can always use that if that is your, the default thing is it's okay. You can even go even simpler and say, the use of tasers is controversial on campus, but campus police say there's a need for it. Chief Brown. Just say their name, and then you can play the quote. You don't have to say Chief Brown told us in an exclusive interview. You just Chief Brown, and then put that in. So that's a simple way of writing into the soundbite. And there are other ways, as we heard. What was his name last class? Can't even remember. The first fellow who was doing a story, which was who was he?
The guy that was doing curling.
Curling, right. I have them open anyway. Where are they? Audio examples. Mike Sugarman. Mike, how could we forget you? Yeah. So Mike was he was using a lot of actuality without necessarily setting it up every time in a formal way. Well, there's a little tip sheet in here, which is nice. And where is it? Not the web quiz, which we could get to later, but where is it? Here we go. So this is on the site, and it's you just click on it to open it up and stuff. But there are, and in fact there are whole books of this, by the way, that we won't even get into. But just some of the ways of writing stuff. Here we go. Writing into a soundbite. Here are some options. And you don't necessarily have to use them, but once you know that they exist, you can use them. So the first thing you want to do is avoid kind of duplication. Packers head coach Mike McCarthy says it was a big win, and then you go to the tape and he says it was a big win. We needed this to get back on track. So you want to avoid that kind of duplication. So instead, kind of paraphrase, says this game was important, and then he says it was a big win, right? And of course here, this is, as they say, never say this. Mike McCarthy had this to say or whatever. So that is a very, very inefficient setup. The trick is very often paraphrase a little bit. If you know that the quote that you've picked is, it was a big win, we needed this to get back on track, then as you come out here, don't duplicate it, write, paraphrase it to set up the importance of the actuality as it comes in. then people feel like everything they're listening to is giving them something a little bit new and fresh. Versus if there's any repetition, then it's like, this is so repetitive. Why am I listening to this? It's kind of like a lecture in school or something. So, you want to watch that out. Okay. I think I probably called a few people out in their reader and wrap for using this type of thing. And that's okay. I mean, we're all learning, right? So it's absolutely the way people, when they first start doing it, they will kind of set up an actuality that way. But the better way is to look into the actuality, paraphrase a little bit, so that you're not duplicating, but actually adding in some more information there. Another thing that I think I called a few people out was starting the story with a headline. And one thing that didn't help is my example from Carol Summers. She actually did start with a headline. So one thing we're going to tell you just in the next 5 minutes in this lecture is try to write things so that they turn out to be in the present tense for broadcasting. But you can't just take something that maybe should be said in the past tense and convert it to present tense. Like a Cambridge fire kills 4 people. Well, that really has to be past tense. If it's something that's happened and it's confirmed, the fire killed 4 people. But in broadcast writing, we're often trying to be as immediate as possible, right? So we're trying to make things sound as though they're happening. So in this case, how could you could still arrange this by giving us the information that 4 people were killed in this fire, but you could start the story off in the present tense saying something like, Cambridge residents are still reeling after 4 people were killed in a fire, right? So you're setting the story up, you're finding some hook that's in the present, but the information is still in the past. Okay, and the thing you don't want to do is to just write it out like a headline. So that's the next thing we're trying to say is try to get things sounding in present tense, but don't make it sound weird. So find a hook. Patrons of Bank of America are resting easy tonight after the attempted holdup was foiled by security guards earlier today, or something like that. So again, try to find something kind of indefinite that's happening in the present so that you can, bring in some past information but still keep it. Nick, you want to say something?
No, I'm good.
Really?
Yeah, I'm good.
Kind
of got my question.
I should have got you right away. Okay, but just jump in some other time. Is anybody saying anything on chat?
Jenny asks, is the intro to Soundbites on modules, or did you just
should be in modules, right? It's in the list of video and multimedia. So video multimedia, it is broadcast writing language tips and style. So that's it. That's the one that we're doing. So trying to keep things present tense is the advice. And yet it can sound really weird if you, my screen's totally black. If you're not acknowledging that things actually do happen earlier in the day, but you're trying to find a hook to write it in the present tense. So we covered all of these little quick points here last class. But where are we? Yeah, so what we just said refers to this idea from the textbook. Look for opportunities to recast your verbs in present tense, including the use of says instead of said for attributions. So let's say we're back to the story about 4 people dead in Cambridge, right? So we said that it definitely happened, so we have to, past tense 4 people dead in Cambridge. But our lead might be, area residents are still horrified after 4 people were killed in Cambridge today. When you go to your actuality, you could then say, Police Chief Brown says that it was unexpected, or something like that, and then play the actuality. So even though you've set the murders up or the 4 dead people in past tense, you can then go back to the present tense and use says quite liberally if you want. So up here the idea, the president says the American people should be ready to attack Iraq. So again, the idea is that if they're on the record and it's like a public statement, you can always come back to having somebody who says this. In Sugarman, you can hear him doing that all the time. It's like so and so says. In fact, maybe we could hear another example to kind of get out of the world of text here. But says rather than said is something you could use pretty liberally there. Let's just go to an audio example. I know Jenny seemed to be interested. We didn't play the Doug Sovereign piece, so let's just try listening to a bit of Doug Sovereign. Profile as well.
All aboard the Hyde Street cable car. This is a man's world. They call him the Gripman, the guy driving the 8-ton cable car. Muni has compared Gripman training to Top Gun fighter pilot school because it takes
coordination, upper body strength.
And Willa Johnson's got it. She's broken through the glass grip, forcing Muni to change the job title to Grip Person. It took 2 tries, but Johnson was determined to succeed.
Just because they say I couldn't do it.
She's not the first woman at the grip. There was one once before, but she's the second and only now.
Sometimes I sit back and look at them and I'd be like, wow, this is really something. This is a historic vehicle and it's really something.
Johnson's got pink monogrammed leather grip covers and a certain rhythm working the foot brake and the long grip handles up and down Nob Hill.
You have to know the feel of the car with the brake and the grip. California Street, Nob Hill, top of the Martin Fairmont Hotel, California Street.
2 weeks at the helm, she's getting used to the tourist jokes about woman drivers.
The men say that, and a lot of the women be like, oh, we're probably more safe with her than anybody, so... it's funny to hear the things people say.
Her regular riders like Rose from Chinatown say only nice things about Johnson.
She's a real nice lady.
And Australian tourist Fiona White is proud to ride with a pioneer.
I think it's fantastic. And I think she's probably very strong because it looks like really hard work changing the tracks and managing the brakes and so on.
How's the bell on this car?
The bell on this car is good. Yeah, it is. It's a good bell.
Good tone.
Yeah.
Johnson is slowly winning over the guys at the cable car barn, though she admits she's got some work to do if she's going to become Muni's first female champion bell ringer. In San Francisco, Doug Sovereign, KCBS.
Cool. What did you guys think of that as a profile?
Got the job done.
2 minutes. 2 minutes, 8 seconds. Remember, your profile should be 2 minutes if you're doing a profile instead of an event.
Wait.
2 minutes.
I liked how they got the Australian woman to do have a little talk piece because that you kind of didn't expect.
Interesting. I felt that towards the end there was a bit of padding. It was nice that they had both tourists and they had regular riders and stuff. I agree. It's great to have other voices involved too. Yeah. I wasn't expecting that. So what was the big issue that this specific character connected us to?
Gender equality.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, JP. Which was brought up within the first 10 seconds, I think, and then they double back towards the end just to emphasize that, she's increasingly accepted at the yard or whatever they said there. Okay. Lots of NAT Sound, right, to keep things interesting. The ding-ding, bell ringing all the time. Yes. And let's just listen to the lead again. Listen to how they did that.
All aboard the Hyde Street cable car.
This is a man's world.
They call him the Gripman, the guy driving the 8-ton cable car. Muni has compared Gripman training to Top Gun fighter pilot school because it takes
coordination, upper body strength.
And Willa Johnson's got it. She's
wasn't that clever now. Okay, so that's what we'd call an indirect lead, where you're presenting, you're going to talk about somebody, but you don't start out saying Willa Johnson is this, that, or the other, right? You bring her in doing her thing before you actually hear exactly who she is. So that's definitely it's a classic indirect lead. Plus we've got some NAT Sound, we've got a recognizable music cut there, which nicely thematically brings up that connection to gender equality in the workplace, right? It's a man's world, right? So the theme is out there, and you know, the kicker is just that we get into learning about Willa, or we meet her. She speaks before we actually get into any attribution. So that moves us, you know, that was good work, Doug, to move us from, get us into the story, inform us of the theme of this profile, and get a word in from the person that we're actually dealing with, the individual, and then attribution. Nice, you know. So a lot going on there that was very well engineered and simple enough to understand what's going on there, even if we're getting a lot of stuff there. So that's a nice example of a number of things that we're talking about. And notice throughout the story as well, he's describing what she does in present tense all the time.
Just because they say I couldn't do it.
She's not the first woman at the grip. There was one once before, but she's the second and only now.
Sometimes I sit back and look at them and I'd be like, wow, this is really something. This is a historic vehicle, and it's really something.
Johnson's got pink monogrammed leather grip covers and a certain rhythm working the foot brake and the long grip handles up and down Nob Hill.
You have to know the feel of the car with the brake and the grip. California Street, Nob Hill, top of the Martin Fairmont Hotel, California Street.
2 weeks at the helm, she's getting used to the tourist jokes about woman drivers.
The men say that, and a lot of the women be like, oh, we're probably more safe with her than anybody. So, you know, it's funny to hear the things people say.
Her regular riders, like Rose from Chinatown, say only nice things about Johnson.
She's a real nice lady.
And
so the whole thing is engineered to happen in the present tense. You know, Rose says this or that. She is, she has, you know, she's. And I guess the feeling that you get, and you can see how this works, is by immediately dropping us into an activity that's going on with our central character involved. It's like, okay, in this story, we are with them right now. It's unfolding in front of us, and it's absolutely justified to use the present tense all the way through. So if you find yourself, you know, look through what you're writing, but if you find yourself, you know, using the past tense all the time, and then they said, and they did, and they, you know, see if you know, again, can you tweak the story? Can you set the story up so that we're actually doing something, you know, we're in the midst of an activity as it's going on. That's the trick to setting things up so you can write in the present tense. And I think it is much more engaging than, you know, telling the story in the past tense, and it can be engineered this way. Thoughts about this? Okay. I mean, as you know, but the thing to watch out for is just, if you're telling it in the present tense, is there anything weird going on with that? You know, if there's a story fact which is outside of the flow that you've set up, of the activity that you're following with the person, or this, you know, you know, if your present tense is the entire day of, you know, today's the day of national mourning, and you know, whatever, Jane is going to remember her husband who died in 9/11 or something like that, you know. You can't set it up so that things, you know, things that happened in the past definitely happened in the past, but you can write all your way through the present tense that you've set up. Micah, do you have a hand up?
Yeah, I think I saw this on the forum earlier. We're allowed to use past tense, but it has to be active, right?
It is always better to keep your sentence structures active. Yeah, but you know, things can be in the past tense and yet active. You know, the police shot the gunman. You know, it's past tense, but it's active. It's active, right? The police shot the gunman. So, yeah, it's definitely okay to use past tense when you know,
it's necessary.
Yeah, it's necessary. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Say George Bush is the former president of the United States.
Yeah, former President George Bush.
That was a bad example.
Exhibited his latest paintings.
Oh no, don't bring those up.
Working through the guilt of conning us into the Iraq War. So we do have to say the Iraq War is in the past. Yeah. Who knows? It's probably, you don't want to labor this so much but when you're writing the story, check it out. A lot of this is like a second draft type of thing. Go through it and see, okay, how can you make this more present tensey? Cool, there's that. Let's see what else we've got here. Says, yeah. All right, we talked about pronouncers or just writing in the pronunciation of odd names or other phonetic elements, right? Abbreviations, we talked about, if you're going to use an acronym or something, what do we say? CIA, that's fine. ARF, if you expect them to say ARF in one word. Did you write that through? ARF, ARF. Numbers and symbols, we looked over the rules for that. So again, once you've written the story, just go back in and look at your numbers. And if they're over 11, then you can use numerals. If they're under 11, you will be writing them out. If it's 2,000, you'd write it that way. If it's 12,000, you'd write it that way. So we looked at those, right? Those are just expectations in terms of format. Structure, okay. This is where they just talk a little bit about the lead, the body of the story, and here they get into their kind of circular structure idea, which I think is fair enough. Again, in the Doug Sovereign story that we just listened to, we could pick through it again, but I think, he did bring us back to the theme of gender equality towards the end. I did notice that. Did you guys see any more circularity in that story? Or hear any more circularity? I like going for the visual metaphor. Let's just see if we can. It's only 2 minutes. Let's try hearing it one more time and see if we can detect kind of a loop going on there. Structure. Think about the structure of this.
All aboard the Hyde Street cable car.
This is a man's world.
They call him the Gripman, the guy driving the 8-ton cable car. Muni has compared Gripman training to Top Gun fighter pilot school because it takes
Coordination, upper body strength.
And Willa Johnson's got it. She's broken through the glass grip, forcing Muni to change the job title to Grip Person. It took 2 tries, but Johnson was determined to succeed.
Just because they say I couldn't do it.
She's not the first woman at the grip. There was one once before, but she's the second and only now.
Sometimes I sit back and look at them and I'd be like, wow, this is really something. This is a historic vehicle and it's really something.
Johnson's got pink monogrammed leather grip covers and a certain rhythm working the foot brake and the long grip handles up and down Nob Hill.
You have to know the feel of the car with the brake and the grip. California Street, Nob Hill, top of the Martin Fairmont Hotel, California Street.
2 weeks at the helm, she's getting used to the tourist jokes about woman drivers.
The men say that, and a lot of the women be like, oh, we're probably more safe with her than anybody, so... it's funny to hear the things people say.
Her regular riders like Rose from Chinatown say only nice things about Johnson.
She's a real nice lady.
And Australian tourist Fiona White is proud to ride with a Pioneer.
I think it's fantastic. And I think she's probably very strong because it looks like really hard work changing the tracks and managing the brakes and so on.
How's the bell on this car?
The bell on this car is good. Yeah, it is. It's a good bell.
Good tone.
Yeah.
Johnson is slowly winning over the guys at the cable car barn, though she admits she's got some work to do if she's going to become Muni's first female champion bell ringer. In San Francisco, Doug Sovereign, KCBS.
I think he said bar.
Bar or
Yeah.
is it bar or barn?
Barn.
Oh, it's a bar. They keep the they keep them
they call
keep them in the bar.
Cable cars the cable car barn.
The barn.
Yeah, the
Oh, okay. So it's the barn. Okay, feel the barn. So was there circularity there? I guess in that. Yeah.
At both the beginning and the end, they mentioned her being the first something. In the beginning, they mentioned she'd be the first female cable car operator, and in the end, the first female bell ringer champion.
Gotcha.
And then they also, in the beginning, they started off with sexism, and they ended with sexism.
Yeah.
And in the middle, it was just like how the cable car works and what people's opinions were.
Yes, right, exactly. You got the structure. So if there's circularity in this story, it has to do with, the
glass grip.
Yes, exactly.
So
The glass grip.
Crazy term.
The glass grip.
No, sexism for like that.
Sexism.
Piece. It's like that's
Yeah.
such an intense. Like she made light about the fact that guys make jokes. It's like,
Right.
Sometimes you just need to take it less seriously.
Well,
What that
I mean, we
was.
just coined it, didn't we? I mean, in the story itself, Doug Sovereign calls it the glass grip. So he's kind of making a light of it, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just said sexism at work.
Yeah, she seemed to take it in stride.
We weren't trying to say that
Yeah.
that it's the most horrifying kind of discrimination.
You're a cable car operator. People aren't like throwing things at you or anything.
I hope not. They're saying snarky stuff.
At least that brake actually works reliably nowadays. It used to work like half the time.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we did discover though some use of circularity there to come back to the theme at the end, and I agree with where Nika characterized this part of the story as people's reactions to her and what's on the cable car, and to me that sort of felt like filler, but there you go. And I think structurally that is sort of a bit of, okay, what are we going to do here? Let's see what people think about it. And, to me, those are always the weakest parts of stories is, interviewing the person on the street type of thing, because they often don't know very much and we don't care too much about what they got to say. But
She's a real nice
lady. Yeah, exactly.
Jenny wishes me to quote, the male mockers need to grow a pair, she says.
Maybe when she's in class next time, she can clarify what she means by that. The male, does she talk about the male? I don't know. Pardon me?
I think she's talking about the terms.
RXNS.
Reactions. RXNS. It's like a shorthand in video scripts for reaction shot. So RXN.
No.
Yes. What's up?
Never mind, just wondering.
Okay, but I mean, it's beyond me. Jokes, Rose, tourists. Yeah, it's true. What do we really care that Rose thinks she's nice? But it gives us, a nice accent. And the idea, I guess, that Willa Johnson does more for the people who ride than just pull the brake. Maybe that's something. I kind of felt, again, these are sort of profiles, slice of life type of things. So can't ask, too much from it, I guess. But again, still, we saw structure in there. I think that wasn't bad. Let's see, what else have we got here? Integrating additional elements. Well, we're not going to be writing to video until we get to the TV part of things, which will be getting pretty soon. Writing into and out of sound bites. So we talked about that. This is really a place to pay attention to. Once you got your sound bites and you're connecting everything together, go through it again and look and see, are you setting your sound bites up as efficiently as you could? Or are you falling back into that, Rose, an old lady on the cable car told us, and that's a no-no. That's something to avoid. Yeah.
What about sound bites that aren't like quotes? Like you hear the ringing of the bell.
Yeah, so that's called NAT Sound. Remember? Yeah.
But how would you write that? Like,
Yeah, I just ask you. I mean, you'd go crazy if you had to write NAT Sound for every single thing that was in that story. So I just go NAT Sound, cable car, bell, rings, and if you want, you can write periodically or something like that to suggest that it's going to go in there more often than that. You'd really only want to interrupt the flow of your script if something specific happens that, you know, spins the story around. Is like, I don't know what, if it's just for punctuation, suggest that it's there and that's it. You know, NAT Sound always helps a radio script, making it more interesting. So, but you don't have to like get down to it every time.
I have
not
book slams down several times.
Woo! All right, book slams down. People sniff and sneeze. Kyle?
It's not like a requirement, right?
Just what I would say is think about what would be, you know, useful NAT sound for your story. That's all.
Yeah. And door closes.
Well, remember that in our chapter about interviewing, it also says pay attention to context when you're doing the interview. So, you know, if you happen to be, I don't know, interviewing in someone's van and they're heating up some beans or something like that, you know, it's like, is that something you want to work in, or, you know? So maybe you can't dream it up off the top of your head, but pay attention to it while you're doing it. Because if you did have to record and produce this, you'd seriously be looking for that type of sound. But, yeah, Nick?
Oh, what about music? Because usually there's music in the beginning. How do we introduce that?
There's not usually music, but you can use it once in a while. Like in all that we heard here, well, the Homobile story had great music in it. And this one, they do have a cut. So if you want to put in a little piece of music, go ahead.
How do we introduce that? Like,
well, you'd write, who's the artist? What's the song? It's a man's world. And then if it's interesting that you have the lyric of that particular part, you could write out the lyric, you know. And I would not say yet how you should identify that, but off the top of my head, we should find out. But let's not say yet as how to identify it. It wouldn't be NAT Sound though, because NAT Sound is like something you pick up while you're there in the field. So, yeah, so you could write out the lyric if that particular part has to be there. That'd be fun. You could do that. But most news stories don't have it. But you know, in a longer feature piece that's 2 minutes or more, it could have its place for sure. It'd be fun. Something would be cool. Yeah, there's this guy, Steve Wadhams, who is legendary in these radio documentary fields, and he was really big, like in the 1980s, about trying to get all radio news to have more NAT sound in it. And he did this story that he always used for illustration, which was they had, you know, returning to Cambodia, like long after the war was over. But they found mass graves and stuff, and so he had been sent to cover something like that, and they found a cave which was full of human bones. And he did his story like walking into the cave and like getting lots of crackling sounds, and you know, talking about, you know, moving through the cave, we can see, you know, more skeletons piled up and stuff like that, you know. And the idea of just having that NAT sound there made it really significant, you know. And there were a lot of docs that were done after that, you know, where it's like just, if they're going to interview someone, they'll hop in a Jeep and you hear the sound of the Jeep as they're going, and they work that in there, you know. So it's part of the idea, I guess, of keeping things present tense and you know, getting into an action where a character's involved. You know, somebody last semester did a really nice story about dance classes here at CCSF, and about, you know, different kinds of people getting to know each other as tango partners and stuff. And she had worked in, you know, some of the musical and sound cues of like how people were getting along, and the music that was being played. It was cool. It worked.
It's so weird. I was literally just talking about maybe taking one of those classes.
Yeah.
Go over there to shower every once in a while, and I walk by, and there's just like groups of people.
It's a testimony to how effective that story was. Everyone, I think, when she read it, everybody felt like, yeah, that's cool. We should go take one of those classes. Because it was nice.
What classes?
dance classes here, you know, kind of like social dance classes at City College. It's like,
I tried. They fill up really quickly.
do they? Yeah. It's probably like the same people going back as much as they can too. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, story types. Well, we you know, again, we talked about what a reader and a rap are, and when we get into video, there are these other types that we'll be learning about very, very soon. So we'll come back to this chapter when it's time to look at that. Cool. On the module itself, so it's easier to see which one we were dealing with. Okay, let's see what this video holds for us. Keeping it simple.
Hi Journals, this is Marjorie with Journals Tip of the Day. Since grammar school, we've been taught that when it comes to writing, we have to expand on our thoughts. Essays needed an intro, supporting paragraphs, and a conclusion. Well, forget all that. When it comes to writing for broadcast news, remember to KISS, meaning keep it simple, students. A story for broadcast should ideally be no longer than 5 sentences, and it should answer the following questions. Who, what, when, where, and how. KISS also applies to the wording of the story. Use simple words and keep the sentences at less than 25 words. And the tone should be conversational, so that anyone watching the news can understand the information you are providing. Well, that's all. For Journals Tip of the Day, this is Marjorie.
All right, another earth-shattering video resource. I don't mind what she said about sentence length, but you know, you're allowed to use more than 5 sentences when writing your radio feature, because it's going to definitely be more than 5 sentences. So. Keeping it simple.
Radio feature ever.
Yeah, keeping it simple. Instructional videos. Gotcha. Okay. Anything else?
When is the next step? Is just coming in with our like.
Yeah, you have.
It's due is the actual like written up.
Exactly.
Radio feature.
Right.
Okay.
So I've got your questions right now, and then what you're working on next is I believe we have like a 1-week break, and then the script is due. So like next Tuesday, there's nothing due, and the week after is your script is due. So what you should be doing now is getting asking your questions, getting your interviews, getting those sound bites out, and then figuring, okay, how am I writing those sound bites into a story? What's my theme? And then once you've done a first draft, going through and looking at the types of tips that we got today in terms of, looking at your sentence structures, making them active, trying to manipulate things to getting into the present tense as much as you can without contradicting logic. It's like people were killed yesterday, it has to be in past tense, but the reactions to that we're discussing are present tense, and then you can, get that out there. And then looking at all the kind of minutiae that we talked about in terms of formatting and stuff. Just paying special attention to setting up your actualities, writing into them in an efficient way where you don't repeat what's in the actuality word for word. You can even paraphrase and move into it in a better way. So once you've written it all out, take a look again and read it out loud and check the length of your sentences and stuff, and make sure you're not gasping for breath after a 40-word sentence. It's good to be simple. It's good to build things up in an active sentence structure, just one step at a time. Be good. All right, shall we do a little web quiz and then call it a day? If we can answer some of the simple questions that they seem to ask. Let's see. Maybe.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are our midterms and finals going to come from directly quizzes like this?
A lot of them will come, yeah. Maybe not all. Yeah.
Wait, quizzes?
There are no quizzes, so I think what Kyle means is, are we going to draw midterm and final exam questions from these question banks? And the answer is yes, definitely. All right, but it may not exclusively be that, because we learn more than what's just in the textbook. But okay, so some kind of writing means sticking firmly to the noun verb or noun verb object sentence. What would that be? I'm already confused.
Concrete.
Guys think concrete? That would have been my idea. Let's see. Submit No.
I knew it.
Concise.
I knew it.
Well, you should have spoken up. Okay.
Kyle sounded more sure than I.
Concise. He always does. He sounds convinced. Okay. Question 2. In broadcast, the audience members only get how many chances to hear what the reporter said?
One.
C. If we don't get this right, something's wrong.
Podcast.
Unless it's a podcast. Good point. Writing to be spoken. In broadcast writing, complex numbers are written.
Inaccurate approximation.
I go with JP in this case. Let's see. It's always a good bet to go with JP. Okay, inaccurate approximations. That's true. Whereas in a print story, you could, actually go. It's $1.23 million or something like that. In broadcast, you're more likely to say over $1 million. Because it's easier on the ear, and if you get 2 or 3 factoids like that, your audience will have their head spinning. So you tend to use approximations, but accurate approximations. Most broadcast scripts are typed.
Typed,
right?
double or triple space.
I believe so. Okay, so that's what we do. We type them out and we double space them.
And written by
etc.
notes.
Yeah. When you type your script, look for opportunities to recast your verbs in
Present tense.
present tense. Alrighty, awesome. When you need to use abbreviations, you can use something to dictate how you want someone to pronounce something.
High
Space.
space.
Let's see. Yes, you guys are good. The lead of a broadcast story is written akin to a,
Print or web headline.
I say, oh, you're right, JP, I should have followed you again. All right, a print or web headline. All I could say about that is don't write it exactly as though it's a headline. 4 dead in mass murder or something like that is not the way you start a broadcast song.
False.
There were 4 dead.
That's
Broadcast writing structure isn't exactly conversational.
True.
I think that's true.
I think that's a question which is
Funny.
designed to make conversation up. So let's see.
True.
Isn't
Is it exactly conversational? Well, for those of you who say it's true, how do you feel that it's different from conversation?
Wait, isn't exactly a conversation.
It is.
Didn't they say you're
It's too vague.
conversational in the
Yeah,
video we
but
just saw?
Some
Exactly.
it's supposed to be somewhat conversational. This says it is not exactly conversational. If you
Okay.
want it to be
So,
exact,
so how would it depart from pure conversationality?
Let us deal in absolutes.
I mean, what I heard say is it should be conversational, but it should be conversational as though you were speaking to a friend of your mom or something like that. All right, so it's slightly cleaned up. So I'd say it's true, not exactly conversational. Let's see what they say. Oh, we were right.
It's true. It's the
So where I think it deviates from just conversational is that, you keep the F-bombs out, you keep, a lot of slang out. You, like I said, it's as though you're speaking to somebody who you want to impress with your intelligence and politeness. Because broadcast copy has to be read aloud smoothly, the script is often double or triple spaced.
Yeah, we just had that answer. Sure.
Okay, good. In broadcast, the reader must also know how the word should sound when spoken.
true.
I guess so, huh? Alrighty, and next up. Scripts often include phonetic elements called phonetics.
Jesus.
I think they're actually called pronouncers, aren't they?
Wait, no, that's false. That's false. That's false.
Let's go for false. We're going to follow JP's advice. Exactly. So they're called pronouncers, not phonetics. All right, thank you. Broadcast copy tends to use exact numbers.
False.
False. There we go. Okay, we use approximations, accurate approximations. In the field of media, we ignore rarities and avoid reporting on elements that make them different from everyday occurrences.
What?
So in other words, this contravenes the oddity principle of story interest.
False.
False, false. It contradicts what we were being told, exactly.
That was my story.
What a textbook. Broadcast writing tends to follow less of an inverted pyramid structure than print or web writing. Come on, what was I telling you here?
True.
Oh, thank you, JP. Don't dress it up. It's easy, that one. Come on. In broadcast, the writers assume that the audience members are fully paying attention to the story.
False.
False, right? We're well aware that people are driving and they may be dodging pedestrians or something. So yeah, definitely false, right? We're writing. I only got 87%. All right, I'm going to report myself. Okay, there you go. So, right, the correct answer to number 1 was concise. Concise writing means sticking firmly to the noun verb order. All right, thank you very much. 7 minutes early. I appreciate your attention. Next week, just looking ahead at what's up next week, but we are in this chapter about reporting the basics and beyond. There are sections about writing a profile and writing an event script. So if you want to look ahead, if you happen to be writing a profile, for instance, it's particularly interesting what they say. There are tips about writing profiles and stuff. So, but we will, of course, cover this in class. All right? So apart from that, your homework is to get your interviews done and you know, look into them, find your sound bites, and that's it. We'll see you later. And do read The Guardsman. There's some good work in there by our classmate Lori on page 5. She's written about the City College alum debuts at Gateway Theater, so check that out.